In this video podcast, we're going to talk about delegation skills and how to delegate to employees and even to virtual assistants or remote staff. If you're a manager or a leader, we'll show you very concrete tactics to identify the right tasks to delegate, how to communicate effectively to set your teams up for success, and how to hold everyone accountable, including yourself, in a way that boosts morale and productivity. Whether you're working with an in-house team or managing remote workers across the globe, you're going to learn how to delegate effectively. Joining me is Dr. Jeff Kaplan, Executive Leadership Coach. Jeff, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, let's dive in. Let's talk about identifying what to delegate, because that's one of the most common questions people have. And they don't want to necessarily be micromanagers. They might be. That's one of the challenges they have to overcome. But how do you identify what to delegate?
Yeah, as much as you can. And so one of the mistakes I think a lot of leaders, two mistakes. One is that they say, oh, I don't want to overburden, like we're all overburdened and they're overboard. And I can do it better. A, of course you can do it better because you've been doing it for 2 years and they haven't. But secondly, it's a developmental opportunity. You are depriving them of their development. So your short answer is whatever you can, but also you're looking for, if someone's new in the organization or new in the area that you're trying to delegate, low risk to then moderate risk, right? You don't want to be delegating high risk things. When I say by high risk, high visibility, it's going all the way to the top or to the organization, throughout the organization, or high risk that it could cost, if it's done incorrectly, it could cost substantially in whether it's financial or otherwise.
How do you match up delegation tasks with an employee's skill set and their growth ambitions to enhance that engagement and performance?
So I love that you said growth ambitions, because one of the conversations I know that you have done in the past with your companies and direct reports is you've had conversations. Imagine down the road, right? How can I help you get there? And so it starts there. What are your future plans? And because there's a gap between their current skill set and their future plans, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I want to be here. Oh, okay. So if you haven't done assessments, which I'm a big proponent of doing assessment, but minimally you're having a conversation, hopefully during performance review time, and you're looking at ahead. And to me, it's two things. What are you good at that you want to take, that you want to take on? What's three? What do you like to do that maybe you're not doing now? And even shuffling the deck in terms of different direct reports, because this person hates doing this and you love this trade-off. And then finally, where do you want to grow? So what skills do you want to develop that you're not good at now? I'll just say this too, Raj, you just said like how much basically hand-holding do you give? That latter one, hint, right? I want to grow. I'm not good at here yet, is obviously going to need a little bit more hand-holding.
That's a good point, because you've got somebody that's new to the role, the company. Maybe you're hiring a virtual assistant and you need to delegate tasks to them. You do need to spend some degree of time training them on what you want as the outcome. So how frequently do you want to connect with them? So could you walk us, like the whole process of delegating, walk us through an approach to delegating tasks that ensures that you've got clarity in what you need and it sets up both parties, you and the person you're delegating to, for success?
Yeah. So I just wrote down, I wrote a book, Habit Change, and it talks about 6 reasons for underperformance. So let me just throw these out really quickly, and then I'll get to answer your question. Because I'm going to frame it, Raj, in the way of what you need to do. Lack of information. So making sure that you're very clear, you give them the correct information and the goals. You have clearly defined goals with metrics. What does success look like? And by the way, direct reports are going to do a lot of head nodding and say, I got it. And then you're going to say, okay, what did I say? And you're going to realize they don't got it.
I think what you just said is so important, because what people will do is they will agree with you, they will nod. And then if you don't ask them that follow-up question, which is just absolutely critical, what did you hear? If you don't ask that last question, you're not going to get back what you expect.
That's right. You almost never will. I've been doing this for a long time. It amazes me, Raj, like something that seems so obvious and simple. And we just people have different hearing styles, different communication styles.
It's almost like a game of that childhood game of grapevine, where you say something and someone else passes it along. And the more people that pass along, it's something completely different on the other end. But even with just 2 people, when you're trying to give instructions on what you need done, just that reflection can be, oh, that's not exactly what I said. That's maybe I didn't clarify enough. So let's go on. That's a really good point. So just remember to always ask for what they just heard.
That's right. And so let's say
Okay.
you have a team of 4 people, right? Here's the vision. And I was working with a client who did just this. We did a series of assessments for her whole team. And it was a wake-up call. Someone says, yeah, I'm really good at this and I'm doing this and I don't like it, right? And other people literally would say, I like that, right? And she imagined, I don't remember if she did it this way, but imagine just post-it notes all over the wall. Right. And so it's like one of the things I've told the leaders is you just break down all the tasks that need to be done. There's tasks that you're doing, there's tasks that maybe they're already doing, and there's tasks that need to be done. So there's 3 things: tasks that you're already doing that maybe it's time to hand off, tasks that they're already doing, and then tasks that are going to need to be done. Right. And then ideally, you've got 4 folks. Ideally, you maybe start with some assessments. You can talk about that if you want, and you have a conversation first as a group, maybe, and then as an individuals and say, okay, so here's what we, the team, have to get done. It's almost like I have an image, Raj, of a basketball team, right? Like in school, like you have the captains are picked, and then the captains pick their team. So I was always picked last, right? Nobody wanted me, and so it's quite. It's like weird. It's one of those weird things, right? How am I going to be last, or I know
Right.
I'm not going to be first, but anyway. And so literally wouldn't this be a fun exercise, having the team start to pick the kinds of things that they want to take ownership and responsibility of. And imagine, Raj, how much greater sense of ownership and carry through and responsibility they have when they literally picked it off the wall.
Yeah. To the extent that you can do that, sometimes you have to just say, okay, I can't keep doing all this stuff all myself. I need to let other people do it. So let's go to this next question, which
Yeah.
is how do leaders effectively communicate your expectations, deadlines, and autonomy levels when you delegate tasks?
Yeah, the deadlines is a big one. I can't tell you how many, and I'm guilty of this myself, that say, I need to get this, I need this done. And maybe say in the next couple of weeks, if there's not a deadline, it's not important. It seems weird to give deadlines. And you don't have to always dictate the deadlines. If it's something that truly has some flexibility, say, look, given everything else that's on your plate, when can you get this done? And they say, I can get it done by next Friday. You say, okay, how about we make it the following Wednesday? I just gave you a 2-3 day cushion, right? But it's got to be done then. And you need to let me know before we even get close to that date if there's going to be an issue so that we can figure out together how to restructure. But that's the timeline thing. So you said, what do I delegate? And here's the thing that I'd love people who are listening to this to get away from, which is delegating by role and responsibility. Now, hang with me because I am a big fan of clear roles and clear responsibilities. And I'm a very big fan of somebody needs to have ownership of something. And if something is clearly in someone's role, they own it. But I really want people to think about, again, skill level, not just because something is someone's role does not mean that's what they are great at. And if you can begin to think more fluidly about the team and the different skill sets and the different interests and really work as a team to figure that out. Now, you said sometimes you just don't you have the bandwidth to do it. You just have to assign it. And that's great. And what usually happens, because we've probably both been that person, it gets assigned to the busiest person who gets it done, the one that you can rely on the most. And then what you don't want
Every time,
right, you
right?
don't want to
Every
lose that
time.
person. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then they start
Yeah.
feeling resentful because these slackers, right? That's an indicator that you have a gap. You haven't been developing folks, right? You haven't paid attention because you're too busy. I get it. I know you're too busy. But it's what I tell people. It's like the rocket ship. 95% of I don't know if that's the right figure anymore, but 95% of the fuel on takeoff. Yes, it's going to be a lot of heavy lifting as you're developing these folks and helping them be confident in the areas that they need to be confident, but you've got to do it. Otherwise, why do you have direct report?
I think that's one of the biggest things that leaders may overlook is the amount of work you have to do upfront because you have to put in that time. You have to put in those cycles to get those people trained on doing those tasks because otherwise you can't scale. You are the bottleneck to your growth. And I see people all the time saying, it's just so much easier if I just did this thing myself. It's going to take me just as long or longer to train somebody to do something I could do myself. And as a result, they don't develop the team. So that the next time it comes around, they still don't have anyone to delegate to because they're doing all the work themselves. And as a result, they move at a snail's pace instead of the rocket ship growth that many other companies see just because they know how to delegate better.
That's right. And if you don't know how to delegate, you might be really good technically. And guess what? You're not getting out of that technical role because
Yeah,
people aren't seeing you as a leader, right? They're
that's
seeing
right.
you as a technician, as an individual contributor.
That is so critical. It will stunt your career growth if you don't learn how to delegate properly. Let's go on to holding people accountable. So, what are some of the best practices for maintaining a balance between oversight and empowerment in the context of delegating tasks?
It's one of my favorite subjects. So let me start with this. I'm going to guess, Raj, that if somebody said, "Have you raised children?" your answer would be yes. And because I know that you have
For me,
two
it would
kids.
be yes, I have.
And I would say, no,
Yeah.
you haven't. You've
Mm,
raised two independent, happy, productive adults. And in the same way, as a manager, your job is to not raise children, but to raise adults who it's like you don't solve the problems for them, you help them become better problem solvers. You don't make decisions for them, you help them become better decision makers, right? And so if somebody underperforms, it's because one of these different things that I started to talk about, but let's not go there. But basically, there's a reason for it. And you, as the leader, have failed somewhere, right? Whether you didn't give them the right information or you weren't clear around the goals, objectives. So, what I say about accountability is they are people first, right? And if you, here's I think, a good takeaway. Remember what we talked about, your direct reports get a head nod. And what I've learned over the years, and a lot of the folks I've worked with have learned, is people aren't always going to be as transparent as you would like them to be. So they might be afraid, for example, to tell you that they don't know what they're doing or need help.
yeah.
And so you have to make it really safe in terms of holding people accountable. It's, hey, so this is what I was thinking I was going to get or what I was looking for. And this is what happened. Let's walk through that. What you're trying to do, Raj, when you're holding someone accountable is you're trying to identify the cause of the underperformance and their decision-making process. You're trying to unwrap how they are making decisions so that you can see where that you failed, not like punishing them, like going back to my analogy, a child in the corner.
Yeah. And I think making sure that they feel that empowerment is very important. How do leaders provide feedback and coaching to employees in a way that really promotes their personal growth, their professional growth, and their accountability without diminishing their morale?
So by coaching throughout the whole year, right? So let's say you do a performance review, and what comes out of that is your business goals for the year, but hopefully also your leadership goal, like your personal development goals, right? So you've got the business objectives that you need to meet, and you've got these other things. So with these other things, what I would say is I like to use a wheel, like literally like a wheel with the different competencies that they're working on. So maybe decision making or external communication, internal communication. I love someone who's working with his reports. He's yeah, they're lousy at math. I'm like, all right, so math is a competency. Right? And so then it's which one. So start with them. Which one of these do you want to develop this year? And now let's talk about how you can do it. If it's needing information or skill, it's probably a training. If it's motivation, then it's probably breaking it down into tasks and helping them develop that way. It might be something that needs coaching and mentoring, right? So it's really figuring out what the task is. But if you find that you have to do something because somebody else didn't do it, then you should be doing it with them or somehow bring them into the mix so that you're not just taking over their responsibilities.
One tactic I use is if I'm not getting the results that I am hoping for, I will just start meeting more frequently. And so rather than just doing a weekly check in, I
Exactly.
might say, hey, let's check it. If it's Friday, I'll say, let's check in on Tuesday to see where we're at with things. And I phrase it that way because it doesn't sound like they're not doing a good job. And that's why I just say, let's check in to see if there's any, I call them yellow flags and red flags. Red flags are things that are absolutely blocking you. And yellow flags are things that could block you, which might turn into red flags. Sometimes as the leader, you can help remove these flags because maybe there are dependencies on other team members getting things done. And sometimes hearing it from the boss to those other team members will make it across that finish line. But people have to let you know about flags. And one of the most frustrating things as a leader is I've seen this happen time and time again. Someone will send a note expecting a reply back and they're waiting and waiting. 5 days go by. They're still waiting for that one person. I go to check with them and say, so what's the status? Oh, I'm waiting for this person. When did you last connect with them? 5 days ago. And I'm first thought in my head is, why didn't you follow up sooner? Come on, we got to get stuff done. Take responsibility, be an adult, go reach out to them. And that's frustrating. So I think coaching is helpful for that. And also shortening that interval between your meetings can help overcome those things.
That's great. 1,000%. Sometimes I've had somebody where I just have daily check-ins. And so for that person, it might be project management. Like they may lack project management skills. So maybe they go to a project management course and learn to use Gantt charts or whatever, just so that they can track what's happening. Highly responsible, dependable folks tend to take it personally when someone does not respond to them. And I just invite the listeners to not make up any stories about why they didn't respond. Everyone's really busy and overwhelmed. And can we just assume that everyone's trying to do their best? Right. And so when you come at that frame of mind, that's, hey, maybe I just pick up the phone. Hey, just wanted to check in. First of all, how you doing? Okay, great. I noticed that I haven't heard back from you since I sent this thing a couple of times. I just want to first just make sure you got it. Oh yeah, I got it. Overwhelmed. Is there anything I can help you with? Now, not that you can take on anything on your plate, but just that gesture. Is there anything I can help with? And again, treating them first as human beings will get you far.
Let's spin now a little bit from accountability for your team to accountability for yourself. So how should leaders hold themselves accountable for the outcomes of the delegated tasks, especially when you're balancing multiple projects, maybe multiple teams?
I always talk about 3 levels of accountability. I think you've probably heard me say it before. Level 1 accountability is where you're holding yourself accountable. Level 2 is where the gang, right? The group, the team is holding each other accountable. And level 3 is when the boss is holding you accountable. If something I've said in our company that if the client is asking for something that quite frankly, basically we're already 2 steps behind. We should be anticipating their needs and getting them what they're going to ask for soon enough. So anyway, so how do you do that? A, anticipate needs, clear communication. But going back to project management, right? So I would ask you, how have you held yourself accountable to commitments that you've made?
I will do weird stuff. Sometimes I will say, I will buy this car if I reach this goal. Just personal things. Like that's my reward for achieving a certain revenue milestone. And I won't cheat on it. I will wait a year if I have to or longer. Trimming it down to something that's a little bit more not tied to revenue, just maybe basic tasks. It could be, I will treat myself and my spouse to a really wonderful meal when I get something done. And it's weird because I'm tying a personal thing to a work goal. But sometimes, I don't know, these mind tricks to myself, that they just seem to work. And I find that it gets me over that finish line.
I love it. I've been doing that for eons. I truly was diagnosed with ADHD. And so over the years, I've had to create this little fun incentive structures. Even just today, Raj, someone was looking together. She provided a couple of dates for a social event for us and our spouses. And I was looking at the calendar and I'm like, oh, I'm doing, like a day training on this date. That would be perfect, right? Because I can look forward to it's taking me 3 months to get ready for it. This is awesome. I can look forward to that when I'm done. Do that all the time for sure. I'll also set little timers with myself. Okay, it's 3:30. So by 4:30, I want to be done here. I've asked people to call me in 2 hours, right? Here's what I'm going to try to accomplish in the next 2 hours. Accountability buddy. So 1,000%. And I'm the same as you. It's definitely, I like to play, but I work first and then the reward.
So the reward part of it is really important too. Bringing it into how do you self-regulate or hold yourself accountable for your team's tasks? What I've done, and it's been effective for me, I was taught this technique, thankfully, when I was younger on in my career, and that is to have a weekly meeting that is a one-on-one meeting with your direct reports, and it's just got a couple things on it. It's what are the 5 things you were working on last week? And it doesn't have to be the number 5. It can be anything. 3, 10, whatever it is. what are the 5 things you're going to work on this week? And so we both agree that this is what you're going to be focused on. Because then the week after, when we have the same meeting, we look at did you get these 5 things done? What do we need to adjust? In addition to that, I put yellow flags and red flags. So are there things that I need to get involved with to help remove obstacles to get you to that completion task? So it's simple. It's a 1-pager, 5 things from last week, 5 things from that you're going to do this week, yellow flags, red flags. And that's it. I have a separate section for any other notes that I might want to take, but I use this process. In fact, I even created a document that people can download if you go to morebusiness.com. Just type in one-on-one meeting template, and you can just download it from there and use that as a tool to help make sure that you're holding yourself accountable and your team accountable at the same time.
Yeah, it's one of the things I think I've this thing that I developed a long time ago called co-creating the working alliance. And one of the couple of the quotes about having conversations about how to manage, how to work together as a report and then as a manager. And one of the questions is, how do you want me to hold you accountable? And then another question is, how do you want me to support you? How do you like to be recognized? Because the way that you personally like to be recognized might be very different than how somebody who reports to you likes to be recognized. Do they want to be recognized in public? Do they want to be recognized in private? Do they get like squeamish if you like compliment them too much, acknowledge them too much? But having that conversation about how do you want me to hold you accountable? If you miss the boat on something, how do you want me to approach you? Do you want me to approach you in real time, or do you want to wait until like our one-on-one meetings if it's not something that's very timely?
Yeah. What would you say are some of the common pitfalls that leaders fall into when they delegate tasks? What kind of things should they be watching out for? And micromanaging clearly comes to the top of my mind, but what are some of the others? And then how do you actually know?
Tom, lack of clearly defined metrics of success. Like they haven't
Mm.
really, they think they know what they're asking for, but that willow down the lane, like the other person doesn't know. So that's one. Two is not giving them the resources that they need. And three is not giving them the level of support they need. They're either giving too little support or too much support, right? Because they haven't been able to gauge the level of autonomy that this person either needs or doesn't need around a particular project.
Let's shift now to something that everybody is dealing with, remote teams. In the context of these remote environments, hybrid environments, what kind of things or adjustments, should I say, leaders need to make sure that their delegation strategies are still effective and that you've got team cohesion?
Yeah. Well, let's break that out, right? Because team cohesion, there's a lot of things that people do. Let's have a norm that people turn on their cameras. It still dumbfounds me that people have these environments where we're having video calls and 3 people are on camera and everybody else is not. They're multitasking, right? So would they do that in a live meeting? Can we not dummy down like the level of interaction just because we can? And so that's one. So doing things like that, having little fun every Friday. We always take 15 minutes to bring something fun or interesting or share some object in the house, or so taking advantage of the being in people's homes, but finding different ways to do that, to build the culture and build the community so that they want to be engaged. That's the key. If you find it's a little bit like hiring a lawyer around to put together these like very detailed legal documents because you're about to form business with someone. If you don't trust them from the start, no legal, you need a legal document, but it's not going to. In the same way, if you can't, you can create structures that are inherently accountable, but you need to do the. Here's the takeaway I really want people to think about is create a fun, motivating, collaborative, supportive environment so people want to, for example, turn on the cameras. And yes, still have it as a norm and an expectation. That's one thing. But as far as deliverables, maybe you have a dashboard where people can see on the internet or whatever your site is or whatever, WhatsApp, whatever you're using to communicate what's going on, creating consistent lines of communication. But also then I'll just say this is having a set of rules around when to turn it off.
Can we bring this back to the delegation part of it remotely? What kind of things do leaders need to be aware of when delegating remotely? And remotely might even mean different time zones. Maybe you've got people halfway across the world where they're not always awake when you're trying to delegate tasks to them. What are some recommendations, best practices people can follow?
Yeah. So Help me understand when you say delegating remotely, right? So what we've been talking about so far is delegating different tasks, responsibilities, right? That kind of thing. Go ahead.
So
What?
context could be, for example, let's say you're leading, I don't know, a software development team, and you're here in the United States, and you've got team members in Europe, Australia, India. You've got them all over, and so you just need to make sure that everybody's like on task, and especially with this remote work environment that we've got. I know in the technology industries, which is where my background is, you don't really need to be physically where you are, where the headquarters are to do the work, but you still need to create project outlines, task outlines. They do things called sprints to make sure that the projects are getting done in a timely manner. But you don't always talk to your team members. And that leaves a bit of a communication gap. So you have to be extremely clear in the descriptions of what you actually want done, just because you can't really talk it out like you would in a conference room and then everybody go away and do their thing. So, what are some of the things that people need to watch for when you're delegating in an environment like that?
So to me, the biggest delta is when you are remote, you need to increase communication in all different ways, right? Use the phone more, use video, use texting, use chats, use email. Also have a really good way of using email. Don't just flood people's email boxes. When you're doing in person, it's some of that communication, like you're missing the water cooler conversations, right? There's a trap that I think people can get into, and I can certainly be guilty of this, is somebody is performing and they're always available when you reach out to them, right? Yay. Now you've got, let's say somebody's not always available. Like, what the heck? Like, where are they? And you're thinking they're probably watching TV or something, but they'll always deliver. They get the job done. They're performing. They're a high performer, right? So you're like less worried about that. But imagine the scenario where you have an underperforming employee and they're non-responsive. That's
Mm.
where you have a problem. And the first thing I would go to is this the right fit in terms of the role for them?
It's just they might be in the wrong role or in the wrong
Wrong.
company, depending on
Well,
the
wrong, right? To work in your
yeah.
company, right?
One of the things that I know is a pitfall sometimes when you're managing remote teams, and it could also be just like when you work out different work hours and so on. I tend to work on Saturday mornings because I've got clear time. I don't have any meetings and I can read things and I get ideas. And what I'll do is I'll end up firing off notes to my team members. And so I remember several team members were all used to it. We got a new team member and I would send notes to them too, not expecting them to reply on the weekends. I don't expect people to work on the weekends, but then they felt pressure. Raj sent me a
Right.
note on a Saturday, and then they would start replying to me and, oh, hey, thanks. But what I didn't get was I really need to make sure that they feel safe to not respond on the weekend. So I had to have that follow-up conversation. Thankfully, they were smart enough or courageous enough almost to say, hey, do you really want me to respond right away when you send me something? Or are those tasks for the following week? And I said, oh, great, timeout. I'm sure this confused you and I apologize. It was my bad. What I really mean is, look, this is when I'm working. It could be 2 o'clock in the morning when I've got some great ideas and I got to send off notes. And I do, but I don't expect you to respond until you're back in the office.
Yeah.
Take that to heart.
My problem is, so I also work on Saturdays for the same reason you do. And it's my big work day of doing project stuff, right? That not client facing. And I do want them to respond. When I hire them, I say, by the way, a couple hours was like, that's part of the
I
agreement on
think
the
as
front
long
end.
as part of the expectation, then that's part of the
Exactly.
role.
But
That's part of the
otherwise,
role.
have you noticed that there are now applications? I think Outlook has one where you can set. I think literally, I recently think I was writing an email and it said, "Hey, do you want
Schedule
to?"
your messages to go out
Yeah,
all
to
at
go out
different
Monday
times.
at 9 or something like that. Yeah, like Monday at 6,
Yeah.
something it said.
Yeah.
Exactly. And because I think you like me, like I'm
Yeah.
firing away and I got to get it out there so I can take it off
Yeah.
my
That can
list.
certainly make life a lot easier for people. Jeff, let's do a quick bullet point list of what are the main things to consider. So, just to summarize our conversation about delegation skills, what are the top 3 things in bullet point format that people need to do to make sure that they're delegating well?
Listen to your direct report. One, listen to what are their needs, what are their interests, what are they skilled at, right? Maybe do an assessment there, right? 2, communicate really clearly, right? About what you're expecting, what the expectations are, what success looks, and then follow up. Follow up, whether you're having to do check-ins every 2 days or once a day or once a week, but follow up, check in, and make sure that they are tracking and then you are tracking in your own way.
Jeff, thanks for an insightful conversation.
Yep. Thank you. It's always a pleasure, Raj.